Hi there. Thanks for nominating my book, Secret Sounds of Ponds, for the Big Other Book Award in Nonfiction 2024. What an honor to be on a list with all those cool books from wonderful authors. The book is actually about underwater pond sounds from plants and animals and the mysteries that they suggest and inspire. Some of it's about other stuff. The section I'm going to read is about the death of my father. I remember that day so well. The riverbanks were high, overflowing. People kayaked in the streets. It was the day my father passed away, 8 years after he suffered a stroke. During another wide calamity, 8 years trapped in a wheelchair, unable to move, horrified at becoming a patient who would never recover, forced to feel helpless in the midst of an active, working, traveling, experiencing life. On the bay, the pond was destroyed. He also died. Even during the funeral, the electricity had not yet come back. The rabbi reminded us that it was 8 years earlier, on a day of extreme heat, that the city's power grid failed. The day of the great blackout, when no one could keep cool, when our systems failed. My father also collapsed. I was returning from a trip, and without electricity could not be reached for several days. The rabbi said this at my father's funeral. This man suffered a stroke on the day of the great blackout and left us 8 years later on the day of a great storm. That's the kind of power he wielded. The audience chuckled. I have no doubt the power will be restored. God endlessly renews the world. Now, years before, probably while I was still in high school, my father casually told me this. At my funeral, please play Benny Goodman's Sing, Sing, Sing. I looked up, registered that thought in my mind, and made sure I would not forget. 30 years later, I had to learn the part. My father was always a Benny Goodman fan. I got a kick of the idea, thinking that Goodman was somehow the Bruce Springsteen of his time, a megastar, kid from the working class who made it big. And like me, he played the clarinet. My dad had told me earlier when I was 10, why not play the clarinet? You can play it in classical music or jazz. He did not suggest that I play it with the underwater sounds of ponds. Now, at my college graduation, 1984, they did not announce who the honorary degree recipients would be until they got to march along in the procession with everyone else. Giddy with excitement, my friends and I were marching to the party through the streets, playing our instruments like some kind of New Orleans jazz band. I had a graduation robe on, a clarinet in hand. I craned to try to recognize any of the honorees walking by, and there he was, Benny Goodman himself, getting an honorary degree. He saw me holding a clarinet and smiled. I remember that when Václav Havel, freed from prison, was speaking up for freedom and democracy for his nation, the Czech Republic, he announced to the world in his inaugural speech as president, we have to put essence before existence. This seemed to be some kind of veiled reference for the opposite of what Jean-Paul Sartre believed. He and other existentialists wanted to put existence first. So the fact we are here, we live, we are, we endure, comes before any sense of figuring out what is right and what is wrong. Maybe that's why Sartre and his ilk were such fervent communists. Well, in theory, everyone working together equal did sound pretty good at the time. Here's how Matthew Alley orders it to celebrate his once eternal pond. Existence precedes essence, because it's all related. All creatures and every power, the whole earth and for all possible worlds, all intimately connected and utterly intermingled. Which means you can't think one side well without thinking the other. You've got to think in both directions at once. It's easy to see if only we look, easy to hear if only we listen, easy to smell, to taste, to touch if only we let ourselves feel it. And feel it we must. I feel it, Matthew. Visiting the place where your pond used to be, I remember everyone and everything that used to be here and now is not. The pond ecosystem exists only through relationships, not appearance or disappearance. The pond may no longer seem to exist, but the relationships that honed its evolution remain, all the way down to the tiny sounds that we sometimes can capture, but have always been there, long before we deign to notice them, and long after all of us will be gone. Ali knows we can never explain the richness of such experience. But he needed to hope in hell that all this philosophy he has pored over for years, that he has mastered inside and offered up to his students, can help him make sense of how his surroundings can be both permanent and ephemeral at once. This guy, Matthew Alley, he wrote a 750-page book about Jean-Paul Sartre and a pond up in the woods near where we live. And this pond was also destroyed in Hurricane Irene, the same hurricane that happened the day my father died. Here's another excerpt from Matthew's fine book. A pond is the patient work of myriads of multitudes of earthly creatures and worldly powers, a confection of life. It's just a simple pond in the woods, an elemental brew, doing what ponds do. It's only a pond, and after all is said and done, it spills without apology into marshy flats below where its waters perk back into brook and flow on to the river and to the sea. So it goes, lake to brook, brook to pond, pond to brook, to river to sea. So it goes, sea to sky, to all seas and all rivers, all lakes and brooks and ponds. It quenches the earth, it waters the world. It's only a pond, indeed. Buried inside this vast philosophical quest in a beautiful course of nature writing is a beautiful quest of nature writing, a tender witness to an ordinary beauty so close to us. But yes, I did play a version of Benny Goodman's Sing, Sing, Sing at my father's funeral. I took the old sacred recording of Benny's Carnegie Hall concert, which concluded with this fabulous tune and an unusual neo-Burundi-like beat played solo by the drummer Gene Krupa. Drums alone with clarinet like some kind of primal thing, looking far back and far forward from the big swing band sound of its time. And it was just me and the laptop at the podium in the synagogue, playing looped sections of the original. I smiled. I got Gene Krupa in a box, with a Woody Allen-ish voice my father would have found amusing. Then I picked up my clarinet and joined in, trying for the first time to sound like Benny, one of my distinct ancestors on this horn. Afterwards, people were puzzled, since it seemed I had composed some new remix work for this very event. How could you do it, they wondered. Don't know, I responded. I had been preparing for that moment my whole life. Using the standard technique of electronic musicians, now easy enough to do on any mobile phone, I took a piece of the original song, probably the key section, the syncopated, repeating, even beat of the unique Gene Krupa, and assembled it into loops, effectively taking out Benny's original swinging horn part. Then in the midst of my grief, I added my own. This was a lot easier than talking to the assembled relatives and friends, some who had not seen me or my father for decades. Like Peter Gabriel told me at the beginning of this book, if you use words, someone will always be there to argue with you. That original background track is on right now. I've never had any need to use it since, but hearing it makes me want to play along. It's a celebration of life, the perfect thing to have played to say goodbye to someone I loved. Thanks.